Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Arena Roma II, which is a 2009 released board game designed by Stefan Feld and published by Queen Games. This one takes around 30 minutes to play and is strictly for 2 players. So this is actually a sequel to Stefan Feld's first game, Roma, and is actually compatible with that one if you want to mix the two together. And unlike pretty much all of Stefan Feld games, this one is the most confrontational. You do have some direct player contact and conflict. And the board is going to look like this, where you've got this central column here of all these different pip values that lock together in this kind of a modular method. You've got a bunch of cards here, so at the start of the game, each player is going to start with 5 cards. You're going to keep 3 of them, you're going to pass 2 to your opponent, and then you're going to allocate them to the different spots here. But I've added another card here just so I can see or show you more of the different cards that are potentially going to come up in the game. And you've got a few more spots here, not only the 1 to 6, but you've got the money spot here, you've got the bribe spot here, and you've got the draw card spot here. Each player is going to get given 10 points at the start of the game. You're going to get given 3 dice of your own colour. You've got a battle dice, and of course you have the big deck of cards. And the objective of the game is to either force your opponent to lose all of their victory points or to have the most victory points by the time that this common pool runs out. So mechanically this game is really simple to play, and the first thing you're going to do on your turn is have a look how many empty spots you have on your row of cards here. So you can see that every slot here is full apart from number 6, therefore I'm going to lose 1 victory point for each of those slots. So in this example I'm going to lose 1 point and put that back to the common supply. Now I only have 9 points. And then as a free action, I can play as many cards as I want from my hand, and provided I can afford to pay it. And the card anatomy is going to look like this, where you have a value here, which is what it's going to cost to pay. You've got the defense value of a card if another player chooses to attack it. And of course you have the ability here. So on this Bestia card, this one allows me to attack an opponent's card with the weakest defense value. And if several cards qualify, I can pick which one to attack. So yeah, as a free action, I might choose to play that one by spending the money and then allocating it to a free spot, or even replacing an existing card and putting the other one into the discard pile. But as the main focus of the game, you're going to roll your 3 dice, which of course are going to show the different pip values, and then you can allocate them as you see fit to the different spots on the board. So of course I could put this 5 here. On this 5 location, and take the ability of this card, which says remove 3 victory points from the general supply from the game. So if I'm doing particularly well, I might want to deplete that pool and try to bring the end of the game closer. But if you don't want to use the actual cards, you can choose to use these bonus abilities like this one here, which is going to let me take the amount of coins equal to the pip value I've allocated there. So this will give me 5 coins, which of course is going to be used to play new cards. Or you can also allocate them to this spot here, which is going to show how many cards you're going to draw from the stack, and then you're going to always keep 1. So it doesn't matter what pip value you put there, you're just going to you're going to draw as many cards, but you're only going to keep 1 regardless of that number. And the other spot here is the bribe one, which works slightly differently. Very similar to these other spots, but instead of allocating the dice as you would normally without paying any fee, you actually have to pay the amount of money equal to the dice that you are allocating to that spot. So this would actually cost me 5 coins in order to use this ability. So naturally you want to be putting lower values on this one, so it's more affordable to play. So these cards do lots of different things, and there's actually quite a few different paths to victory here. So I'll just go show you through a few of these cards, and then we can take a look at what the different paths to victory are. So you can see here the forum card actually requires you to place 2 dice onto to use this action. And the first one just has to match the number, but the second one could be anything. But that second dice is going to give you a number of victory points equal to that second dice. So if you put like a 1 and then a 6, that's going to give you 6 victory points, which of course is very good. You've got this one here, the speculator, which means you can look at your opponent's hand and take one of those cards. So it's got a bit of take that and grabbing those cards from other people's hands that they've collected. This one here lets you discard the card opposite. So again, you're trying to deplete cards on other people's sides so that when it comes to the start of their turn, they're going to have to forfeit more points, because as I said, at the start of each turn, for every empty space, you're going to have to lose a point if it's your turn. This one here means that whenever you take the money action, you're going to take an extra 2 coins. So a nice way to keep a nice flow of income coming. This Castra here lets you play the top card from the draw pile onto one of your unoccupied die token spots. So if you have an empty spot here, then you can choose to just top deck from the stack and fill up one of those gaps to prevent you from leaking those points. You've got the taberna here that says you can gain 1 victory point from the general supply for each of your opponent's face-up character cards. So if you know you're already slipping behind on characters, or if your opponent has played a lot of characters, then if you have this card, then that's a really good way to gain victory points. Again, we've got another 4 on there. We've got this some of the take that cards, or the more aggressive cards here. So this one lets you attack the opposite card, and what you're going to do when you attack is you're going to roll this attack die, and you're going to try and match or exceed the defense value here. And if you do, you're going to remove that card. But this one here lets you increase that kind of pit value by spending 3 Cisteria, which is your money, just to increase it by 1 for each 3 that you spend. You got the porters here that lets you swap one of your face-up cards, one from your hand. The boat here says you can take 3 victory points from your general supply if you have more face-up characters than your opponent. So again, you can go for a real kind of character-driven strategy. You can go for a building-driven strategy. You can try and make people bleed their money by trying to attack their pieces and remove their cards, meaning that they're going to have to keep placing more or keep bleeding points, which is what cards like this Bestia does. And you've even got ones here like this Aqueduct, which is really cool because it actually lets you remove ones from the pool here, which I mentioned earlier, where if you are winning on victory points, but your opponent still has got too many to rely on them running out, then you can actually try and get rid of them from the pool in the first place and eliminate them from the game to try and draw the end of the game closer. And you've even got ones like this, which is going to just mess with your opponent, where it says in the next, if I can focus there, in the next turn your opponent has 1 less die to roll. So you're going to mess with with the other players that way as well. And there are a bunch of other cards here, all kind of doing roughly the same thing. So this one here just lets you pay 10 Cisteria to just destroy a card. This one here lets you roll the battle die and you get half rounded up of the victory points of that pit value. You get Ares here that lets you, the opposite building card is placed on the discard pile. You've got the Predator here that lets you place up one of your face-up building cards on the discard pile, and you gain the equivalent of the defense value of the victory points. So if you've got a really strong building that you don't need anymore, you can maybe use this card and change that building into victory points. You've got this one here that lets you re-roll all the dice that you roll in the first place at the start of the round, so it gives you more flexibility and mitigation. And again, you've got these extremely aggressive cards here, like this Elephant, that lets you just automatically destroy a card opposite of the value 4 or less. So that's pretty much what the game consists of. You're just going to keep taking turns in order to use your dice, play cards, try and again, deplete your opponent's points, or to try and have the most points when that pool runs out. And then, of course, the winner is going to be determined. So let's talk about how I feel about Arena Roma II. So if you are kind of a regular consumer of my content, you're probably aware that I'm a huge Stefan Feld fan. And this one did feel like a bit of a disconnect because it is so confrontational and so in your face compared to all his other games. No other time do you kind of have a role to resolve and try and smash your opponent's cards in order to make them lose points. But this one does actually work quite well, in considering it is more of a dueling style game, and it does have that kind of Stefan Feld vibe in using the dice in clever ways. I do like the way that the actual fallout of those battles isn't so in your face in terms of rolling a dice and you maybe lose that many points. It's simply try to roll the dice, eliminate the card, and then if you can't replenish the card, you're going to lose that point. So it is kind of Eurofied in the way that the combat works, which I haven't seen before, and it is kind of a matter of trying to plug those holes as quickly as you can in order to keep to stop you from bleeding those points whenever it comes to your turn, which is a nice little twist on this kind of game. I also do really like the different paths to victory that you can take. As I said, you can really focus on just doing that and making your opponent lose all their cards. You can focus on building buildings and then getting points that synergize with that and getting, for every building you have, get a victory point. You can focus on just the pure points gaining ones where you're just rolling dice and then getting that many victory points. There are certain cards that let you kind of manipulate the board, and if you have a card on one that you really want to use, but then you roll a 4, the 4 card might say, "I'll pick a card of your choice." And so there are different ways to kind of point to cards that you want, and you can build a tiny little engine and try to cater things to your taste and try to cater it to your strategy and your a path to victory. So I do like that. I like the ways that you can focus on bleeding the points out here. That's quite cool. But I suppose that's one of the double-edged swords about this game is Yes, there are different ways to victory, but some of them can feel a bit grindy and can take a bit long in order to be resolved. So, for example, here I played a few games of this one. Some of them were over in 10-15 minutes, and then some of them took over half an hour to play, which did start to feel like it was a bit long and started to feel a bit more of a kind of a war of attrition rather than a kind of quick dueling game, which you'd probably want this to be. So I do think this one does have potential to outstay its welcome, particularly if you're not drawing those more punchy cards. So yeah, that is something to bear in mind with this one, is that it is a very light game. Yes, there is some clever kind of interaction between the cards, but it does have potential to take longer than you'd probably want it to, because ultimately you are mainly reacting to what dice you've rolled. So, you know, there is quite a lot of luck in this game. Yes, you can kind of mitigate that luck sometimes by getting the right cards out and, you know, spending your higher values in order to draw the particular card you want out and to allocate them. But you are still, you know, fighting through that deck and trying to get the card you want. And of course, if you do get a particularly strong card out, your opponent is probably going to come for it and try to eliminate it from the play anyway. So yeah, it does have much more of a luck factor than your average Feld would have. The actual mechanisms themselves of the game are rather simple. He said you're just rolling your 3 dice here. You can spend them as you wish. Are you going to use them for money? Are you going to use them for cards? Are you going to use your bribe card? Or, of course, are you going to use the ones you've allocated to these certain spots? And, of course, managing your hand is important as well, because, you know, you want to be getting the right cards in there. And you've got no limit in your hand. And I do really like the fact that you have no limitations on how many cards you're going to play each round. It doesn't take one of your action dice. It doesn't take an action at all. So you are free to just replenish what you can. And, you know, it's not that hard in order to get money in the first place. So I quite like the fact that even though you do lose cards quite frequently, it doesn't feel like too much of a grind in order to replenish those cards and to, as I said, to plug those gaps in. Because the cards aren't overly expensive. You know, the most expensive ones are, I think, like 9 or maybe 10 coins. But most of them are rather cheap, so you can actually get them played quite quickly and get them on the table without any limitations. So I do like that, but at the same time, you do have to actually spend an action to get more cards into your hand in the first place. So it is about how you're going to use them. You do have some relatively interesting choices here, but you are somewhat tunnel visioned because, again, you are limited to those dice, and there isn't much mitigation apart from the odd card that will let you re-roll things or point you in different directions. The replayability of Arena Roma II is okay. Yes, they have made an effort to, as I said, give you all those different paths to victory, and there is quite a big deck of cards here, and, you know, there are duplicates here, but most of them are kind of unique. There's not a tremendous amount of the same cards in the deck, so you have got all these different paths to victory you can take to give you different things to try, but ultimately it does feel like the same kind of game every time you play. You're going to see the same cards come up, so I do think the kind of replayability is limited. However, there are some different things here that do have kind of peaks and valleys. Sometimes you'll find yourself just absolutely annihilating your opponent, and sometimes you'll have that really long drawn out battle where, you know, you just have a few points left. You just need to hang in there to make sure that you're not going to run out, and then you can start to slowly fight back. But I will say that once you are kind of in that negative and starting to feel like you're being beaten, it is hard to get out of that pit, and sometimes it is really hard to make a comeback. So it's not very swingy, which again is either a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at these kind of games. But yeah, I think there is a ceiling for this one, and it isn't going to stand up like his more traditional Euros. The components in the game are all really good. I mean, the cards themselves are really nicely illustrated. I believe it might even be Michael Menzel artwork. So as you'd expect, the cards do look pretty great. All the text is very clear to understand. The iconography is good and simple. The boards here, this strip of pip values do string together nicely and feel good quality, as you'd probably expect with Queen games. I'm generally happy with their production, and despite this one being an older game, it certainly does hold up to that quality. The money is decent, the points are decent, so a nice small little box game that holds a good standard of its production. So to wrap up my thoughts on Arena Roma II, I would say that this game does what it does pretty well. However, what it does isn't really for me, I suppose. In terms of these head-to-head dueling style games, I normally do steer away from them. But, you know, with this one, with the actual kind of spin of the Stefan Feld magic on it, it does certainly take it up to a game that's more suitable for my tastes. I do like the different paths to victory. I like the way the dice are used. I actually don't mind the fact that you can't mitigate it as much as I'd probably normally like, because it is what it is. It is a light, simple game. I like the way that you gain the money. I like the kind of bribing mechanism. It all works fine, but ultimately it is a very luck-dependent game, and there isn't really the kind of magic there for me to keep me coming back to this one. I've enjoyed my time with it, and I think probably the biggest thing that puts me off it is that potential for it to take longer than it should do. And I suppose when I get a game like this to the table, one of the biggest factors for me would be to, how quick is it going to play? Is it going to serve a purpose to fill up, 15 minutes of time while we're waiting for someone else to turn up to games night? And this one just, again, it has that potential to go off the rails and take too long. It's not always going to be the case, and it probably is going to be the rarer exception where that will happen. But that nagging tension in the back of my head, thinking, what am I going to get into here? Are the cards going to come out that are going to just make the game drag and drag and drag? So yeah, unfortunately, this one is probably my least favourite Feld game I've ever played, but that's still not saying it's bad. I think it does what it does well in terms of putting a new spin or a Euro spin on a dueling game. I still rate it about a 6 out of 10. Again, I like the variety. I like the efforts to be made for the different strategies. I like the different paths you can take. I actually really like the factor that you actually bleed points when you don't have these gaps filled. It's a real unique mechanism that I haven't seen before. But yeah, ultimately, I think there's better two-player games out there, even faster two-player games out there that do more with what they have. So yeah, it's not going to be a big recommendation for me, but if you do like your dueling games with a Euro spin, then give this one a look, because it is, again, it's a decent game. It does what it does well, but ultimately it's not the kind of game that's going to keep me coming back for more. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you found it useful or at least somewhat entertaining, then please hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Additionally, if you wish to support the show, because I am a one-man operation and I don't get any support from publishers, then please consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/chairman of the board, where you can back for as little as £2 per month. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.